Wow, the wind chimes outside are really going off, so there's literally no way I can cut that out of this audio. Hello there, and welcome back to The Closet Historian, and back to my sewing parlor, where today I'm finally breaking out the sequins. I've been unpacking the rest of my vintage accessory collection lately, and I noticed this one handbag had a tear in the lace and was just looking a little bit tired, or at least if you are as picky about condition as I can sometimes be. But it was nothing a bit of a bug couldn't fix, so let me try and put a new style of beaded cicada together to spruce up this vintage box bag. And yes, this is the slightly yellowed pastel, ivory, and floral wallpaper in my bedroom. So let me crack open a new fresh pack of beading needles here. These are just the Beadalon needles from Michaels. I can link these below. And then I will go through all of my beads and sequins here at the sequining station, and pick out everything in the gold and black and antique brass sorts of colorways so I can select exactly what I want to use for this particular cicada. And luckily, as you can see, Oliver, the intern, was extremely helpful in this endeavor. I've grabbed a small, probably 4x3" piece of felt here, and I'm just going to sketch on the body of my cicada here, sort of a square-ish head. It almost looks like a Christmas bulb, if you can imagine, like an old-fashioned traditional Christmas light, that like larger size. It almost looks like one of those. And really only the top, like the head and the triangle of this, are going to show once I have the wings on, but we're going to bead the whole thing anyway. And I just used a Sharpie to do that because none of this will be seen in the end. And I'm just going to start laying out what materials I want to use. These are actually metal, like little brass, antique brass stamped leaves that I'm going to use. And then I'm grabbing various different sizes of sequins. These are mostly size 3 and 4 sequins, which are quite small. This is a size 15 Charlotte cut seed bead, and then a size 11 in the same color. I grabbed these from an Indian bead supplier. I can link them below. Took a while to get to me, but the beads were really high quality and they have really unique colors. So I'm always on the lookout for unique beads. I'm always scouring Etsy for unique supplies. And building up my collection of supplies means I have a large palette to dip into when creating something like this. And it does feel a little bit like my old days watercolor painting, where I have all the colors laid out around me and I kind of just paint in my little bug with different colors of beads, different colors and textures. Usually I'm trying to vary the textures quite a lot when I do this as well. But it is, of course, an investment to collect this many supplies, so I know not everyone has the variety that I do at their disposal. Although if you collect little bits and pieces over, decades, you do end up with quite a collection of small amounts of things that are good to kind of use in a collage-ish way, which is in keeping with the way I put my beaded bugs together anyhow. And I am slicing some tiny lengths of gold bullion thread, which is a sort of very miniature spring coil of wire that is used in gold work embroidery. And this stuff does come in many, many colors. It doesn't just come in precious gold. You can get faux gold and many other different colors of this metallic coiled thread. And I will link again to an Etsy shop where I have found this in the past below in the description. And I'm just going to be using regular Gutermann all-purpose thread on my beading needle here. So let me just double that up so I can start out here. I do have some Tilla or Tila beads. I can't remember which it is. I only pronounce this word out loud like twice a year, and therefore I always forget which it is. I feel like it should be Tilla, like tile, because they look like tiles, but I think it's actually Tila. And they are a Miyuki brand bead, I believe. So they have that nice uniformity that we expect from a Japanese glass bead. And I do have some Picasso finished black full-size Tila beads to use for this little guy today, for doing some more of the sort of Klimt-inspired tiling fill that I like to do on my beaded bugs these days. But I'll start with the band connecting the head to the rest of the body of the cicada here, sort of the cicada's necklace, as it were. It's getting a nice collar of brass leaves here. I'm just going to alternate which way these leaves are cupping. They do have a little line down the middle, these brass sequins, so I'm going to face one cupped down, the next one cupped up. Just alternate those for a little bit, again, of variance in the way that the light hits these sequins and therefore gives it a bit of a different texture. Instead of just sewing these on directly, I am just using a small bead to secure these. I have a size 15 black glass bead here. It's really hard to see what I'm doing because those beads are, of course, super tiny, and even the camera is like, can you do something a little bit larger scale, please? But essentially, I'm bringing the needle up through one of the holes of this 2-holed sequin, threading on a size 15 seed bead, and then I will thread the needle back down through the sequin hole, which means the bead sort of serves as like a hex nut holding the sequin into place. And I use this sort of bead on top securing sequins method all the time, especially in making my little beaded bugs, but also on garments as well. And when I'm making something that's a little bit more steampunk inspired, I really like the kind of riveted look this gives when sewing down a sequin to have this little tiny bolt on top. But I'll just continue on in that same fashion all across the necklace portion of my cicada friend here. This is not based on any particular species of cicada. This is just a fantasy black and gold cicada, although I was looking at some of the Trove Lore cicada brooches that they've done in the past. They had this one that had really cool wings that I'll be trying to replicate with this in my own way. I don't do anything as fine as Trove Lore does, but I always say if you want brooches like this without having to do the work, I think Trove Lore brooches are a great investment. I do have a few that I have fallen for myself because their work is on a different scale than mine, as in all the stitches and the beads are a lot smaller. And I always say that their brooches are like the fine couture version of what I do, but the work from Trove Lore is definitely what inspired me to try making brooches like this in the first place. And so I'm very inspired by their work overall, and many people actually make embroidered and beaded bugs. So if you browse around on Pinterest or Etsy, you will see many different variations of these ideas. But to fill in the main body of my cicada here, I am just using various beads here, and I'll start doing this in lines. I've sewn on a couple of the tila beads to start, and then I will use those as a starting point for stringing the rest of the body on. So because the tila beads have 2 holes on either side of the square, I string down one of those holes, slip on a few seed beads, then down into the same channel of more tila beads, a few seed beads in between, more tilas. That way I can kind of weave these beads almost, because they do have the 2 holes in them. You can kind of use that to create a brick pattern with beads in your work. Hopefully that makes any sense. So I just string on a length of beads, and then I'm going to go ahead and couch those down to the felt underneath. So I've strung on maybe 1.5 inches of beads. It probably wouldn't go longer than that without doing a connecting stitch down into the felt. But now I'm just stitching over that string to hold it down into place on my felt below. Again, if you've seen me make any of my brooches like this before, you've seen me use these same techniques on other bugs. And I do use couching quite a lot in general with my beaded embroidery work. So just taking little stitches over the strand of beads to hold it down into place where I want it, and hoping that my thread doesn't get hopelessly tangled. Thank you. You can wax your thread as well, which will help with this issue. I do usually like to start with a center strand of beads, and then I will fill in one side, and then I will just copy that on the other. So I only have to kind of figure out what I want on the one side, and then I'll just mirror that on the other side here. And I'm stringing on a couple of round sequins here. I do like to layer sequins as well. So I've grabbed a size 5 gold sequin, and then I layered on a size 3, which is far smaller, black sequin on top of that. So you can even add texture within a little layer of sequins. So I do like stacking sequins on top of one another, different sizes or textures of sequins. Sometimes you have sequins that are metallic or matte or satin finish or fully transparent, iridescent. So you can create different effects and different textures by layering your sequins as well. And as always, I will recommend Cartwright sequins. Again, not sponsored, all these different supply shops I'm mentioning. I don't do any sponsorships, so none of this is paid programming here, but I love Cartwright sequins. I always recommend them. I will link them below. They do have these tiny, tiny sequins, and you can get very small packets of these. So if you know a color you're interested in, you can go to town and grab a bunch. You can get one small packet, or you can get a pound of them. It's up to you and what kind of project you're putting together. But I just copied the first strand of beads once again through the other side of the tilas here, and then I will just work my way along, couching that strand down once again. And then I decided to come up here onto the head and finish that off. I grabbed a larger bead. I think this is a size 8, I think. No, these are a size 6. A size 6 bead for the little googly eyes up here. And I just secured those beads on the same way I do with the sequin, where I just came up through the hole of the larger bead, took a small bead as the securing hex nut once again, threaded my needle back down through the large bead, and that small bead holds the large bead into place. And I'm going to fill the entire head of my cicada in here with, again, some layered sequins. So I'm grabbing a size 5 antique brass satin finish sequin, grabbing a size, I think these are actually 2.5. They might be the smallest size. No, I think these are still size 3. Size 3 gold metallic sequin, and layering that on top of the satin finish for, again, a tiny bit of extra sparkle on top of what otherwise would be a matte sequin. how do I explain how I choose to do what I do? And I'm just, again, playing the way you would with an artist's palette. I've laid out my paints around me and just drawing with sequins and beads as I go. And if I don't like something, I will reverse track and pull my needle back through the felt, undo something, but usually I just hold things up to the bug as I go and see what I like. Making these is very much a process of experimentation and play, and it's part of the reason I really enjoy it. It's also very therapeutic to just sit and bead a cicada while you listen to the wind chimes and the birds outside. It makes for a very calming afternoon, as long as your cats aren't intervening like mine tend to want to do. But with that same technique of stringing up through the center of a sequin, layered sequins in this case, and then securing them with a bead, I'm just going to fill in the entire head of my little cicada friend here. I hope you are all doing okay out there. I've had a bit of a weird week. I'm trying to do a lot of miniature tasks around my house. Again, I'm still settling into this house. It's a long process of trying to finally unpack everything and get properly settled. I think the next investment I need to make is actually a dresser. I unfortunately was not able to bring my dresser from my bedroom with me. I didn't love the color of that dresser, and it was extremely heavy because it was a real wood dresser, which was nice because I got this really nicely made all wood dresser for $90 at like an antique flea market, but it was too heavy and too large to fit onto the moving truck. So, alas, it would have been really hard to get up the stairs in my house here anyway, but alas, I have no dresser, which means there are a lot of like my casual clothes, my socks, my pajamas are just kind of in piles or in boxes or in a suitcase for a long time here in my bedroom, and it makes me feel unsettled to even have that be the case. Like without a dresser, I feel like I'm living out of a suitcase in some ways, and I've been here for months. So I think that's my next investment. After all this decorating, putting the sewing room together, putting my closets together, turns out what I really need is just a basic dresser in my bedroom. So that's next on my list. And continuing to fill in my cicada body here, I've moved forward here with just a row of strung size 11 seed beads, using one black bead, one bronze bead, one black bead, one bronze bead, creating visual texture just by staggering the colors like that. And then I will thread on some more tilas as I go here, again, trying to interweave those with one another where I can remember. I do kind of like to sew those in a bit of a brick pattern, which I mostly forgot to do for this particular one, but and what I was just doing there was I was stringing on some of the size 3 sequins to use as beads. You can stack up your sequins as well and use them as beads. Look at them from the side. Again, a different visual texture to add into the mix. And despite the fact that I can't really fully decorate my bedroom yet because I can't change the walls, mostly because it requires taking everything out of here, stripping the wallpaper off the walls, and cleaning the glue off the walls before I can paint. And goodness knows how long that takes, especially with just little old me. So I can't really do that right now because it's a huge time investment for not that much of a, impact to my work other than distracting me from sewing and doing other things for a very long time. And it will actually be quite disruptive for my cats as well. So as much as I would love to paint this room, I just can't right now. So I'm kind of doing renter-friendly decorating in here in some ways. So let me know if you would still like to see how I'm arranging my bedroom despite the fact that I can't currently paint in here. And let's face it, I'm just not a small pastel floral on ivory background wallpaper kind of gal. It's got a certain cottagecore charm to it, but that's just not my vibe. I'm more of like Evil Queen, as opposed to Princess Aurora. But again, I am just using the same techniques to fill in the rest of the body of my cicada here, stringing on lengths of beads and then couching them down, and again, trying to not get my thread too tangled on the back. Ugh. And one way to make these look even more 3D is to use a lighter or shinier type of bead in the center, and then a more matte or darker or different color bead along the edges. So as I get down to the pointy end of my cicada here, along the edges I'm using more black beads, and then in the center I'm using more of the Picasso finished seed beads, which are beads that have a bit of a like wash on them. They look like glazed almost, or have almost a verdigris on top of them, so they have a bit of a distressed finish. So I am using the Picasso finished black beads on this as well. It gives a tiny bit of a green tinge to the black finish on here, again, tying in that kind of verdigris look, and we all know how I love a bit of green. But stringing beads on, couching them down, packing beads in as tightly as I can using the smallest beads and using bits of the gold working thread in narrow areas where I can't fit a full-size bead. Actually, the gold work thread works really well to fill in those spaces. So I kind of like to mash a little bit of check pearl in at the end. And to continue my copying straight up of Trove lore, trust me, I would just buy everything they make if I could afford to, but they are fine quality stuff, so they have the price to match. But I've seen that they started making larger scale pieces that are meant not as accessories, but as home decor. So they have like a big moth that they made, and then it's mounted, and then you can put it like under a glass cloche or on a bookcase or something. And now the temptation to make, like, it's given me the idea of like, what if I just hand beaded a coral specimen and put it under glass, or hand beaded a like faux taxidermy bird and then put it under glass and made it look like taxidermy. It'd be a cheaper way to have taxidermy, because taxidermy is so expensive, of course. And for creepy little Victorian naturalist wannabe like me, I would love to have taxidermied birds and such, but I would have to have them under glass because, of course, my cats would love that. I would love to have like a taxidermy peacock, for example, but my cats would eat that, so not in the cards for me, sadly. I don't know how Dita Von Teese deals with this with her cats. And once my cicada buddy is all beaded, I can set this aside for now and start working on the wings. And here's the practice wing I made here. The idea here is kind of making these look a little bit like shattered glass. I'm using some larger rectangle shaped sequins that I will cut into the shape I desire. And again, this is inspired by the cicada made by Trove lore. They have a different type of sequin that is much nicer. It's an Indian sequin of some kind. They are based out of India, so. And India is where a lot of the really cool sequins are made. So if you want to order really epic sequins on Etsy, more often than not, they're coming from India. So a lot of the most epic embellishment is done there. And the House of Dior actually contract with Indian embroiders a lot of the time, in addition to working with Lesage, of course. But I've drawn the wing shapes I am after on some stiffened felt, the like cardstock version of felt, the stiffer felt. It's not the kind of floopy craft felt. This is actually, I don't know how they melt the fibers to make the faux felt here. This is not wool felt, this is some sort of thermoplastic, but it can also be found at Michael's here in the United States. I don't know what the distinction is between this and regular felt other than the feel of it. So just imagine that regular felt is like a fabric and this is like the cardstock stiffened, almost starched variety. It doesn't actually have starch in it, but that's the idea. You could probably starch felt and make something like this. But I have some metallic gold rectangle shaped sequins here that I've cut into slightly more wing tip, like little fang shapes here that I can layer together to create this almost shattered mirror effect on top of the wing shape. I'm leaving a little bit of black space in between to serve as the veining in my wings, and I spent a lot of time really fussing with the arrangement of these before I started stitching anything down, and then when I was happy with that arrangement, I took a picture on my phone so that I could move the sequins while I work and still be able to replicate what I had come up with. And to stitch these on, I am switching to a gold color of, I mean, it's not metallic gold, but close enough. And I will stitch these on both using the remaining hole of the sequin and then just using stitches that are couched over the top of the sequin itself. This again is inspired by the way that Trove lore did it. Sorry, Trove lore. Hopefully this serves as enough of an advertisement for you as well, and not just me copying, but I really am very inspired by their work. The other thing here is I'm just using one strand of thread instead of having the thread doubled, just because I wanted these little cross stitches to be quite fine and not doubled up, so. You could use a contrast color of thread to create different effects here. I'm just going to couch these down and stitch them into place as I had arranged things, although there was a tiny knot in my thread, so things are being a little bit misbehavey. Ugh, honestly, I should just wax my thread, although I don't know if I know where my beeswax is. I used to know, because I kind of just unpacked everything and threw it into drawers, and then I have to now memorize where everything is. I'm one of those like controlled chaos kind of creatives where it might look like a little bit of a mess to the outside world, but I know where everything is. So if someone were to come in and organize my stuff, I would lose all hope of finding anything. And I am cutting a tiny, tiny sliver of sequin material just to custom fit into these little tiny spaces I have left myself here. And again, I'll just couch those down. I'm sorry if my voice is a bit extra gravelly here. I haven't talked to anyone else yet today, and I did record a podcast for Patreon yesterday, so my voice is probably a little bit shot. Luckily, the cats didn't keep me up last night, though. This morning, they were very good. They were all asleep on my bed when I woke up. The morning before, the orange cat kept waking me up every hour on the hour, and that was not cool. I'm not sure what Xander's problem was, mostly because he was meowing a lot, but I don't speak cat and he doesn't speak English, so he had a lot to tell me. He had food. I don't know what his problem was, other than that I was asleep and he didn't want me to be asleep. So he accomplished that goal at least. But this morning they were very well behaved instead, which was a nice reprieve for me. Sometimes I feel like the mom of toddlers. even though they're all 3 now, so they have no excuse. They should be adult cats. And then there's this buddy, Mr. Oliver, who of course came to help me with these wings, which really slowed me right the heck down. But with the sequining finished on both of these wings, as you can see with the first wing, I cut this out very delicately along with my tiny embroidery scissors, leaving a little bit of a black rim, like an outline around the wing shape. Just cut these out, making sure not to slice through any of my stitches. And I have seen many embroidered cicadas that have much more gossamer and delicate looking wings that are very, very pretty, but because this was going on a handbag and therefore might receive some friction, I didn't want to do anything too delicate that could get caught on stuff. So that's kind of the reason I went with this wing design, because I felt it might be a little bit more robust for being on a handbag. All right, wings finished up here. And sort of position those on top of my cicada body, see how that's going to look. But of course I need to finish up the body itself here. So I am just going to slice little tabs into my felt here, turn those toward the inside. I usually use the extra little cut off bits to stuff this buddy so it ends up a little bit rounder and 3D textured. Again, no one will ever see the back of this, so we can go ahead and use the messiest stitches possible. What matters is that things are secured in a way I like, less that it looks nice on the underside. And I will use I keep some bent pins in this little tomato, specifically for this purpose, because they can be bent and will bend again, basically. I use some fine glass-headed pins here. These are from Dritz for this work, because they are bendy, and sometimes I use a sacrificial pin, a pin that will not recover from this experiment. But I do have some double thread back on my needle here, just weaving things around, securing the little bits of felt on the underside. And again, if there is a hollow space, I usually will stuff a little bit of spare felt in there to just puff things up. I'm not sure if they have cicadas in upstate New York. I guess I will find out, because it's about to be summer. I think they have the 10-year ones or the 15-year ones in this region, but I'm not sure if they have like yearly cicadas. I suppose I will find out in summer into fall here. I'm about to experience my first spring and summer here in upstate New York. We'll see how it goes. I might just melt apart with the heat and humidity, seeing as my house does not have air conditioning. So please pray to your god of choice that I don't just melt. All right, finishing up my little cicada body, here is the handbag, and this is the area in question that you really can't see on camera, but I promise the lace is just coming apart and it's coming away from the rest of the bag right here. The other side is still all intact, but this side has this break in the lace, and it just looks a bit tatty and it bothers me. This handbag is probably from the 1950s, maybe late 40s into the 50s. It's a nice brass-bodied box handbag with a bit of glittered, it's like a glittered stiffened satin with this layer of lace on top of it. But it was really hard to stitch into the satin itself, so I really should have put the rest of the cicada bits together before I tried to stitch this down to the bag, but I thought it was going to be easier to stitch this to the bag. Turns out not so much. Because it has that kind of glitter layer underneath the lace, clearly they have spread some kind of glue or sizing onto the satin underneath, and it made it really difficult to stitch through, so that was less fun than I was anticipating. I will stitch the end of my wings together here, like so, just throwing a couple stitches in here, trying my best to not stab either myself or Oliver, seeing as he had appeared once again out of nowhere. Come on, buddy, let me finish this. It's so close now. Of course, if you're less entomologically inclined, you don't have to make a bug. You could do the same sort of repair to a vintage accessory project that didn't involve any sort of, beetle or bug or arachnid of any kind. But I'm much more inclined to make it slightly creepy. We all know I love a jeweled bug, although I have found a few bugs in my house, which, as I say, entering into summer, wow, knock on wood. But in the wintertime, I have found a few bugs in the house, and by me, I mean the cats, and they've all been shield bugs. So we all know how I love a shield bug brooch, but the little brown shield bugs in my house, less so. So I have tried to release a few of them outside. One of them didn't make it, I woke up the other morning and I couldn't find the cats, and they were all surrounding one corner on the stairwell as I went to go get coffee, and it's because they had been terrorizing a shield bug for goodness knows how long. So he met an unfortunate end, full of anxiety in the hours before I put him back out on the porch, but I'm not sure he made it. But I secured the tips of the wings up near the sort of necklace band of my cicada, and then I actually grabbed a upholstery needle, which is quite similar to like a suture needle. For those of you in like the medical field, I suppose this kind of needle would look more familiar. Or upholstery. If you do upholstery, then in which case I have a couple of chairs that I need to have recovered. So if you could do that on the DL for me, tell me all about it. I'm going to try and reupholster some Victorian chairs sometime this year. We'll see when I can afford to buy fabric for those. Of course, I have like the most expensive taste in upholstery fabric as well, which is just unfortunate because upholstery fabric is on another level of price. I am used to buying fancy brocades and stuff for like $30 a yard, but that is real cheap compared to upholstery fabric. The upholstery fabrics I like are like, oh, it's $3.50 a yard. Oh, sure. I'll just pull that on my seat cushion. No. Which is my long-winded way of saying that I managed to stitch this buddy on with my hooked upholstery needle, but it wasn't very fun. You could, of course, glue something like this, but I didn't have any appropriate glue. Then I decided to go ahead and make some antennas and legs in the end anyhow. I was originally going to embroider these leggy bits onto the actual bag itself, but then stitching through the bag was determined to be evil, so in the end I decided to make these out of wire like I normally do for a brooch. Of course, it would have been much easier to stitch these on beforehand before stitching the bug to the bag, but all things learned in hindsight are unfortunate, so I had to suffer through trying to stitch these on afterwards. I did add some antenna as well, and as you can see, luckily Oliver was still helping, and by helping I mean trying to take my thread away from me. Probably should have just locked these babies up upstairs in the bedroom while I finished this up because it would have taken a lot less time. Because as we can see here, he's trying to eat the handle of the handbag. Luckily, in the end, and I do think these little leggies helped, I'm really pleased with how this handbag came out. I definitely think I will reach for it more often now that instead of a little bit tired, it's a little bit funky, a little bit weird. Bugified, it's just a little bit more TCH coded. It fits the vibe. Perhaps to some, I have taken this from slightly tatty to a little bit tacky, but that's okay, I don't mind. In any case, I hope you enjoyed seeing how this project came together today, and thank you as always for watching, and an extra large thank you to my patrons who make my work possible. I'll be back here with more sewing, vintage fashion, costuming, and crafting real soon, so I'll see you then. Bye!